You know, if wishes were horses, beggars would ride. It's an old saying, right? But man, it absolutely hits the nail on the head when it comes to this universal trap that almost all of us fall into. Think about it. We literally spend so much of our time just hanging out in this state of idle wishing. We wish we had a better job, or we wish we had more money in the bank, or a nicer house. But here's the thing. Wishing, all by itself, doesn't actually get us anywhere. It's a habit that basically keeps us standing completely still. But what if there was an actual mechanical, almost scientific way to break out of that habit today? Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we are unpacking a seriously fascinating piece of history. It's a tiny, almost mysterious little red book published way back in 1926, and it's simply called It Works. It was written by an anonymous author known only to us as RHJ. Now, this book doesn't give you a bunch of vague, abstract philosophy. Instead, it promises a definite, straightforward, common-sense plan for getting exactly what you want out of life. And the best part? We are going to map out that exact plan together right here as we go through this.
Section 1. The problem with wishing. But before we can actually get to the solution, we've got to look closely at the problem, and that is the endless stream of thoughtless talkers. We're talking about millions of people who complain or express dissatisfaction every single day, but who never actually define what they want to change. Take a look at the left side here. The author gives us some really great, relatable examples of this idle wishing. There's Jimmy, the office boy, right? He sees a flashy red roaster drive by and says, "Gee, I wish that were mine," but he gives absolutely zero thought to how to actually possess it. Or there's Landon, the salesman, who's constantly protesting that he does all the heavy lifting for the short end of the pay and wishes for a real job, but does literally nothing to find one. Or even President Bundum, sitting in his big office, bitterly complaining about his annual attack of hay fever, while fully expecting it to arrive every single year. They're all just throwing wishes into the wind. Now, look over on the right side. The author contrasts this with earnest desire. This is the power of a trained objective mind, the conscious mind you use every single day, making a firm, concrete decision about exactly what it wants and exactly when it wants it. It is the total, complete opposite of a casual wish.
Section 2. The Little Red Book.
So how do we actually make that leap from just idle wishing over to earnest desire? Well, that brings us to the solution outlined in this concise little manuscript. The author was a highly successful, widely known guy who accumulated a ton of wealth and won over a lot of friends, but he chose to remain strictly anonymous. He credited his entire success to the simple, powerful truth contained in this really short text. And honestly, I absolutely love the story behind the title. So the author initially sent his manuscript over to a friend for some criticism. The friend read through this incredibly short, perfectly to-the-point plan and simply returned it with a two-word note: "It works." That judgment was born purely out of the friend's own real-world experience with these principles, and it just stuck. It became the iconic title of the book.
Section 3. 3 Rules of Accomplishment.
All right, we're now going to break down the exact actionable plan. This is where you can start putting this 1926 secret into practice right this second. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the intense level of detail required for your list. First, you have to write down your wants on paper, completely in order of importance. But here's the catch. You cannot be vague. No way. If you want a car, you have to write down the exact kind, the style, the price, the color. If you want a new home, you've got to map out the structure, the grounds, the location, and the cost. If your goal is to break a business record, well, put down the exact sales total, the date, and even a list of prospects with the exact sum you expect from each and every one of them. The author makes a huge point here. Don't fear wanting too much. Go the limit. And you should be changing and refining this list daily as your desires naturally evolve. The reality is, if you aren't this definite, you simply aren't truly in earnest.
Okay, so once you have this highly detailed list, there are 3 strict, unbending rules of accomplishment you absolutely must follow. Number 1, read the list of what you want 3 times each day, morning, noon, and night. Number 2, think of what you want as often as humanly possible. But look really closely at rule number 3. This one is massive. Do not talk to anyone about your plan. Seriously, you are to tell no one except the great power within you. Discussing this with other people, it's strictly forbidden in this plan.
Section 4. Engaging your inner power.
Which naturally leads us to ask, why? Moving from the how to the why, let's explore the psychological and arguably spiritual engine that actually makes this 1926 plan function. The author explains that every single one of us has a mighty power within, and it is anxious and totally willing to serve us. Different scholars have different names for it, of course. Thompson J. Hudson called it the subjective mind. The author of our book chooses to call it Emmanuel, which means God in us.
But regardless of what you call it, this inner engine is omnipotent. It is entirely capable of carrying any earnest desire from your conscious, objective mind all the way to a perfect conclusion. But, and this is a really big but, it requires genuine, earnest desire to form a connection. Occasional, half-hearted wishes, they just bounce right off of it.
And this brilliantly illustrates the author's reassurance to the reader. Just look at the comparison here. You don't need to sit around and overanalyze how this inner power is going to pull off your desires. The author compares it to agriculture, which I think is a great analogy. When a farmer plants a grain of corn in fertile soil, they don't sit there agonizing over the exact cellular mechanics of how it mysteriously shoots up into a green stalk and produces an ear with hundreds of new grains, right? They just plant the seed and let the mysterious process happen. The exact same thing goes for your list. When you plant a definite plan in your mind and you follow those 3 rules, the method of accomplishment will unfold just as naturally.
Section 5. Overcoming the enemy doubt.
However, you really need to be prepared. The author warns us that the moment you begin to see results, literally the moment you get your very first taste of accomplishment, a natural and ancient enemy is going to show up. That enemy is discredit. Basically, it's the voice of doubt inside your own head. When your desires start materializing, your mind is going to naturally try to write off the success. You'll catch yourself thinking, oh, it can't be possible, it just happened to be, or wow, what a remarkable coincidence. To counter this, the author says you must consciously push back. You must give sincere, joyful thanks and purposefully assert credit to that omnipotent power within you. Do not just write it off as luck.
So the crucial point is how you actually protect your progress from this enemy of doubt. The author lays out some really specific defensive tactics. When doubt creeps in, and it will, immediately pull out your list and read it over. Talk to your inner self about your desires until that skepticism completely fades away. And externally, you've got to protect your highly susceptible objective mind by choosing your friends carefully. You literally cannot afford to be surrounded by skeptics. Hang out with people who already have some of the things you want, but remember rule number 3, never ever discuss your method with them.
Now, as you start to master this, the author drops a very heavy, very strict caution on the reader. He says, you can have what you want, but you must take all that goes with it. Because this system is totally impartial, it's entirely possible to obtain things that will eventually make you miserable or wreck the happiness of others or even cause sickness and ruin. Therefore, you must rigorously audit your desires. You must only plan for things that will bring the greatest good to you and your fellow man.
Section 6. The True Secret of Giving.
And that brings us to the climax of the book's entire philosophy. Once you begin to master your lesser, material desires, the car, the house, the money, you are called to an ultimate, unselfish requirement. In a direct letter to the reader at the very end of the text, the author reveals the true secret of this whole process: you get by giving. The author explains that it's practically impossible to be truly unselfish without experiencing gain yourself. When you see people around you who are standing still, maybe they're worried or discouraged, the absolute greatest thing you can do is share this powerful idea with them. By helping others help themselves, you align with the law of life. Your reward comes secretly in the form of added power and a much larger, infinitely happier life.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative question from the anonymous author of 1926, what are you going to do with it? You've just been handed a simple, definite plan that has transformed thousands of lives. The choice is entirely yours. You can reject it and remain exactly where you are right now, trapped in that cycle of idle wishing. Or you can pull out a piece of paper right this minute, write down what you earnestly desire, test it out for yourself, and eventually